UFC 294, Makhachev versus Volkanovski 2, the highly anticipated rematch that we didn't really know we were getting until recently, but I, for one, am super hyped that we're seeing this fight over Charles Oliveira versus Islam. Charles, for me, is obviously one of the most exciting guys in the UFC, but let's not mince words. He got dominated in the first fight. I didn't really think he quite earned the rematch as much as Volkanovski has. He had the super close fight with Makhachev in the first run around with Volk, and Volk went and got a big finish over Yair Rodriguez. This is the fight we want to see, and I'm so excited to see it. But before that, I'm going to go ahead and break down all the other cards here. This is a Abu Dhabi card, of course, so in the States, we're going to have an early start time. We're less than 24 hours until that start time at the time of this filming. And man, I really just cannot wait. But let's get right into it with our first fight. We have Shara Bullet Magomedov. He is taking on Bruno Silva. Shara Bullet is going to be the minus 265 or so favorite in this one. Undefeated 11-0 in his career. He's taking on Bruno Silva, who is plus 215 and 2-3 in his last 5 fights. This is a long-awaited debut for Shara. He's a guy who kind of broke MMA Twitter because you just take a look at him. He's got like a glass eye or something, or I don't know exactly the details of that. It's something that has prevented him from making his debut in the States. I know that much. But he has not let that stop him from pretty much dominating everyone that's been put in front of him in MMA as well, and kickboxing as well. The guy is a tremendous striker. He's really relies on his kicks a lot, that I've noticed, especially in his second most recent fight against a guy who had a really respectable record. He really relied on his kicks throughout that whole fight, and he does find finishes if it comes in close, which with his knees and elbows and stuff. But I don't see him letting his hands go as much in the fights that I've watched. He's taking on a guy in Bruno Silva who went the distance versus Alex Pereira despite being wobbled so many times. It was a miracle. But he has had kind of a rough go of it recently. Notably, was finished by Gerald Mearshart. And then Brendan Allen, I believe, went and finished him. Despite that, I think Shara will dominate this fight, but I don't know if he'll find a finish. I just think it's tough to get like a head kick KO. It's just hard to rely on that, and I don't really see Shara letting his hands go enough to get Bruno Silva out of there, so Shara by decision is going to be the pick. Next up, we have Viktoriia Dudakova taking on Jinh Frey. Dudakova is the heavy minus 500 favorite. She's 2-0 in her last 5 fights. Frey is plus 380 and is 2-3 in her last 5. Jinh Frey is on a 4-fight losing skid, and one of those losses includes a really tough KO by Polyana Viana, where she really got put out badly. Dudakova, on the other hand, her most recent win was over Estela Nunes, and it was a bit of a fluky win. I mean, she took down Estela Nunes, kind of threw her arm out. Nunes posted with her arm, which you're never supposed to do because your elbow is just not that strong, and just those bones in your arms are not that strong. You're not supposed to post. That's something I learned in my 2 weeks of wrestling in 7th grade. But just had a really nasty dislocation or something. But I think that is kind of a sign of things to come in this fight. I think Dudakova wrestles her way to a finish here. I can see her just getting on top and getting a positional KO, and Jinh Frey just not having an answer for some of the top pressure of Dudakova. So I'm going to take Dudakova by finish here, likely a KO. Next up is a featherweight fight between Nathaniel Wood and Muhammad Naimov, our first Muhammad of the card, many more to come. Nathaniel Wood is minus 340 in this fight, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Naimov is the plus 270 underdog and is 1-1 in his UFC career, one of those being a Dana White Contender Series fight. Naimov is coming off a KO win versus Jamie Mullarkey. That was a fight in the lightweight division. Mullarkey had a lot of success the first round. Second round, he kind of got caught in no man's land, rushing in on Naimov, and he got hit with a right or left hook that just put him out. Bit of a quick stoppage, but definitely justified because he ate a lot of shots on the ground from Naimov. And that was really impressive. Naimov is a guy who lost his Dana White Contender Series debut and took that fight on short notice, I believe, and stunned a lot of people. He's taking on Nathaniel Wood, who's a lot craftier and going to be the more skilled fighter of these two. He's got more experience, and he's a guy who really gets by on... He's got long arms. He's kind of got a weird build because he's a shorter guy, but he's got a long reach, and he's pretty good at just staying out of harm's way and just racking up points in the striking. But I think power has been an issue with Nathaniel Wood. He's a guy who I believe spent a decent amount of time fighting at 135, and he's kind of one of these tweeners where he'd probably be best in like a 140 division. Sadly, that doesn't exist, so he's at 145 fighting guys a bit bigger, a bit more powerful, and I see the power difference being the big determining factor in this one. I think Naimov KOs him, despite being probably a bit worse, but we've seen Naimov KO Malarkey at lightweight, and he did make weight at featherweight, looked pretty good doing it, so I think he finds a KO in this one. He's one of my more popular dog picks here. Would not be shocked to see Nathaniel Wood totally school him, though. You're just getting great value with the KO pick there. The next fight is Anshul Jubli versus Mike Breeden. Jubli being the minus 310 favorite. He is 1-0 in his UFC career. Mike Breeden is plus 250 underdog, and he's 0-3. And Breeden, I am seeing in sort of the MMA Twitter circles, he is a popular underdog, and I get it. Anshul Jubli, he's, I want to say, the first Indian fighter to make their debut in the UFC. I don't know how, or perhaps it's, fighters still living in India to make their UFC debut, something like that. So he's definitely a trailblazer in that way. Jubli, I did take in his most recent fight. He was fighting a Muay Thai guy, and he was an underdog, and he really dominated that fight with his grappling. Was able to kind of find his way on top. And I know India has a very strong grappling culture. Like, just from watching the Olympics and stuff, you see a lot of very good Indian wrestlers. But Indian MMA is definitely behind the curve. I mean, he's the first guy we've seen in the UFC. So I think Breeden could be good value here. He did miss weight really bad, and I'm having a hard time interpreting that. He missed it by multiple pounds, so shout out to Jubli for being a gamer and still taking this fight. I think Breeden by decision could be a good pick here. You're just getting a lot of value out of that. Next up is a middleweight fight between Sedriques Dumas and Abu Azaitar. Dumas is the minus 205 favorite, and he's 2-1 in his UFC career. Azaitar is the plus 170 dog, and he's 1-1. Azaitar is coming off a big layoff. We haven't seen him in the cage since March of 2021, where he was KO'd by Marc-Andre Barriault in the third round. It was one of those situations where he just kind of gassed, and as soon as Marc-Andre got on top of him, he was just kind of wailing on him in mount, and he just could not get him off of him. Dumas, on the other hand, is young and athletic. Azaitar is in his late 30s. He might be 36, 37. Dumas is in the prime of his athletically at 28 years old. He's big, he's strong. He's going to have a significant reach and height advantage in this one. And I think he finds a finish in this one. Abu, I wouldn't be shocked if he looks pretty good early, but going into the second and third rounds, I mean, just that big layoff, you don't know what he was doing that whole time. Whereas, Sedriques Dumas, he's been active. He's probably getting after it every single day. I think you can find a round 2 or round 3 KO in this one. So I'll say round 2. So I'll look like a genius if he does that. Next up is Javid Basharat taking on Victor Henry. Basharat is the minus 550 favorite in this one of the heaviest favorites in the card, if not the heaviest. He's taking on Victor Henry. Henry is the plus 410 underdog and is 2-1 in his last 5 fights. Basharat is undefeated in the UFC at 4-0. And yeah, Javid's super talented. He's kind of does it all. He's got great grappling, really good in space on the feet. And he's had 3 straight, convincing wins. Victor Henry's super experienced, though. He's 26-4 overall, which really is incredible. I mean, I think people get hung up on undefeated fighters, 11-0, 12-0. 26-4 is crazy. I mean, what percentage of that fight? Out of 30 fights, you've only lost 4. I can't do that math right now, but he wins a higher percentage of his fights. He's super good in the clinch, just super crafty. We did see him kind of get handled by Tony Gravely, even though he did win that fight. And I think that could be a bit of a sign of what could come in this Basharat fight. I think the grappling is going to be the big deciding factor here. So I'm going to take Javid Basharat by decision in this one. I think he uses his grappling and just sort of reach on the feet to win this one on the cards. Next up is an absolutely psychotic fight, I will guarantee that, between Trevor Peek and Muhammad Yahya. Peek is 1-1 in the UFC, and he's going to be the minus 150 favorite. Yahya is 12-3 overall, making his UFC debut, and he's the plus 124 underdog. And Yahya really is kind of like Peek in the sense that he's a brawler. This one's going to be a total scrap. I think he's a bit worse than Chepe Mariscal, who defeated Peek convincingly in his most recent fight. We've seen Muhammad Yahya get rocked and KO'd before in several fights, whereas Peek has never been KO'd, even though he took a lot of heavy shots in that fight versus Mariscal. And really for that reason, I'm going to take Peek. I think his chin is just going to hold up longer. If this fight goes past the first round, or we're in halfway through the second round and no one's gone down yet, I could see Yahya being a really good live bet opportunity here. Just because Peek, all his technique just goes out the window pretty much immediately if he had really any technique to begin with. He's kind of got his own style that has worked with him to an extent up to this point, but I think it's going to be trouble against more skilled strikers. So Peek is definitely, if he doesn't shape up some of his striking habits, that could spell trouble for him in the future. But I'll still take him by KO in this one versus Yahya in what should be an absolute firefight. Next up is a fight with a lot of flyweight connotations between Mohammad Mokaev and Tim Elliott. Mokaev is the minus 455 favorite in this one. I've seen him up to minus 500 favorite on some books. He's 4-0 undefeated in the UFC, and Tim Elliott is the plus 350 underdog and is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Really, the biggest question mark is, does Mokaev's knee, what's going on with it? Does it work? Does he have Usman knees right now? What's the situation? We saw him 7 months ago in his fight versus Rafael Filho get his knee shredded to bits. He said, or Rafael Filho said, that they could literally feel his knee crumbling as it was in the knee bar. Mokaev just refused to tap. The dude is absolutely built differently. I don't know how, some of these guys they're different. They're just different. That's the only way to say it. But I do have my suspicions going into this fight surrounding that knee. I mean, first of all, could he have had surgery in that time? I don't really know. I didn't really look into that too much. And if so, regardless, how much could he really train? I mean, I imagine he just stem celled the hell out of that knee. They were just shooting up tons of random stuff. I don't know. Total conjecture. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm kind of spewing. But these are concerns that I'm having just when you suffer a significant knee injury like that. He could not walk after that fight. And Tim Elliott's a guy who's been on the up and up lately. He's super awkward to deal with. He's been in there with Mighty Mouse, so he's not even a little bit afraid of Mokaev. But if there is a big hole in his game, it is his grappling and submission defense. He's been submitted a handful of times. So I think Mokaev, regardless of how healthy his knee is, I think he'll be able to at some point just jump on Tim Elliott's back and get a submission there. So I'm going to take Mokaev by submission. Our next fight is a bantamweight fight between Said Nurmagomedov and Muin Gafurov. Nurmagomedov is the minus 218 favorite, or 220. He's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Gafurov is the plus 180 underdog and is 0-1 in the UFC. Said is coming off a loss, and the fight before that was a fight where he was kind of getting handled by Kakhramonov before just getting a super opportunistic guillotine, I believe it was. So Said is coming in with some of his concerns. Gafurov did lose his debut to John Castaneda, but I think he actually has the tools to beat Said. He's stocky, he's strong, and he's never been submitted in his career, which is where Said finds most of his, or I think all of his finishes, I want to say. He can definitely get taken down. We saw Gafurov get taken down in the Castaneda fight a few times, but he's just a hard guy to beat up, or to keep down. He's super strong. And on the feet, Said's got a lot of kicks, but not that much power, not too much finishing ability from them. I think Gafurov finds a decision win in this one. He's going to go all out. I don't believe Said has ever been finished. But Gafurov is going to just throw everything he has, throw the kitchen sink at him. And I think he ultimately doesn't get him out of there, but I think he hurts him and does enough to win on the cards. Our next fight is a middleweight fight between Ikram Aliskerov and Warlley Alves. Aliskerov is the minus 600 favorite in this one. He is 2-0 in his last, or 2-0 in the UFC, 16-1 I believe overall. Sole loss being to Khamzat. And he's taking on Warlley Alves, who's the plus 425 underdog, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. Ikram is a guy who absolutely has been flying up the middleweight rankings. This was, at some point, supposed to be a fight between Paulo Costa. We know that fight fell through pretty quickly, and it's also kind of up in the air if that was ever really going to be happening, but certainly there is some truth to that. And he's a guy who's super highly touted prospect. Like I said, his only loss is to Khamzat, where he got KO'd pretty viciously. He's got great wrestling and a ton of power. It is worth mentioning that Phil Hawes was kind of working him in that fight before Aliskerov just flatlined him. He landed a head kick, which I think Phil Hawes never really recovered from. And then after landing a straight counter on Phil Hawes, he just folded him. So Ikram, he is a guy who people I think are going to want to compare him to Khamzat just because they're both like that grappling background, Russians, and whatnot, and then they fought each other. But Ikram is not quite as fast and explosive, I'd say, as Khamzat. He's a bit slower, but in terms of wrestling ability, I mean, I think he can match up with anyone at 185. Warlley Alves is a late replacement in this one. It was supposed to be, what's my man's name? The French Dagestani. It's escaping me right now. But, late replacement in this one. That's just tough. So I think Ikram finds the KO in this one. Up next is a light heavyweight fight between Magomed Ankalaev, who's minus 360 and is 4-0-1 in his last 5 fights. And he's taking on the underdog Johnny Walker, who is plus 285 and 3-2 in his last 5 fights. Johnny Walker, he's on a 3-fight win streak, but I think even more important than the record there is the patience and sort of the change we've seen in his approach to fighting. He's not as crazy, balls to the walls as we've seen him before. He's a bit more patient, but he's violent when he needs to be. And, you've heard it from his coaches that I mean, obviously they're hyping their boy up, but they think the sky's the limit. And I really do think that Johnny Walker has a ton of potential. His chin is a big concern, and he turns into kind of like one of those. He turns into one of those like car dealership like freaking balloon things if he gets hit hard. And he's taking on a super dangerous guy in Ankalaev, who for some reason has gained this reputation of being boring, which I see. I mean, his fight versus Blachowicz was a stinker, but he had that reputation before that fight almost. Look up that dude's highlight reel. I mean, you can really stack it up against damn near anybody's, especially in the light heavyweight division. And Ankalaev, he's the more skilled striker. He's got really slick kicks and stuff, and he is going to win this fight more often than not, probably. But the odds we're getting here from Johnny Walker, I think, they're too tasty to pass up. Johnny Walker's big. He's going to have a big reach advantage. I mean, he's the size of a heavyweight, and they have discussed him potentially going up to heavyweight later on in his career, just because that 205 cut might be tough. But yeah, I just can't pass up those odds from Johnny Walker. I'm taking him by KO against Magomed Ankalaev. Ankalaev just lost a lot of stock in that Blachowicz fight. I'm just kind of questioning his dog at this moment, so we'll see if he can prove me wrong. Our co-main event is, you know what it is. It's a middleweight fight between Khamzat Chimaev, and he's taking on the former, I think he was pound for pound number one, former welterweight champ, Kamaru Usman. Biggest story coming in, and Chimaev is going to be the big favorite in this one. And we've seen his odds swell a little bit as a result of this footage that came out a couple days ago. Kamaru Usman grappling with Justin Gaethje, doing one of those publicity open workouts for the press, and he sort of takes down Gaethje and whispers something to Gaethje. People thought he said something about his knee popping. I really, I think all it takes is one person to write those words down, and then your mind just starts kind of hearing that. Someone could have just as easily said another phrase, and I think people would have ran with it as well. But despite that, the knees of Kamaru, regardless, are definitely a concern. This is not new news from him. It's something he's talked openly about before. I'm pretty sure he said in an interview before stuff about him having issues like climbing up stairwells and stuff. Just really concerning from a guy who's taking on Khamzat Chimaev, who is one of the most dangerous and aggressive wrestlers the UFC has really ever seen. You know that Khamzat's going to fake a glove touch and just shoot at Kamaru's knees right away. Kamaru is one of the greatest defensive wrestlers of all time. There's someone, this sucks. I should be shouting him out. I don't know, but I'm sure if you just search for wrestling Kamaru Usman on Twitter, you find it. Someone put together a compilation of all the takedowns people shot on Kamaru Usman. He's done a ridiculous job of defending them throughout his career. I think it took up until the first Leon fight, I believe, for him to let up a takedown, something like that. But Kamaru is going to be undersized in this one. He weighed in under the 185 limit. He says he's cutting weight. Maybe, I'm sure he'll show up a bit bigger, but I think Khamzat's just going to look massive in there compared to Kamaru. And ultimately, I think Khamzat's going to win this one, and I think he kind of lucked out with this matchup here. I want to see him against more real 185ers. If he wins this, he'll get his chance against Sean Strickland, which I'll tell you right now, I'm going to take Sean. But I'm just a bit skeptical of him ragdolling people in this weight class. Like a guy like Marvin Vettori, who probably not even hardly a top 5 guy. I think that just big body, wide body is going to give Khamzat a lot of trouble grappling him. So regardless, I think this is a favorable matchup for Khamzat Chimaev just with all we know about Usman's health history and just him being on the tail end of his career. I think Khamzat finds a round 1 submission here, just absolutely mauls him. But Usman, I hope this doesn't tarnish Usman's legacy too much because he really is one of the greatest welterweight fighters of all time. I think you can make a very strong case for him being solidly the second best welterweight of all time behind GSP. Then, of course, we have our main event. It is Islam Makhachev taking on Alexander Volkanovski for the lightweight belt and presumably the pound-for-pound number 1 spot. A lot on the line here. And for me, like I said, this is the better fight. This is the fight I wanted to see originally over the Charles Oliveira fight. Volkanovski gave Islam a hell of a run for his money. I did score Islam winning the first fight around in the moment. And since watching it, I still would probably give him it on the cards. But make no mistake, Volk broke him. I mean, Volk in the 5th round landed a huge shot behind the ear that wobbled Islam. And then we saw Islam kind of fall to his back in a way that we've never seen before. And for my money, Volk is the best finisher in the UFC right now. Of course, Charles has the most finishes, but I think in terms of just when you smell blood in the water, just that killer instinct, if Alex has you hurt, I think there's no one better at just going for the finish than him. We saw it in the Yair fight. He's just so patient and so violent when he does it. It really is incredible. Just watch his finishing sequence versus Yair, and you know what I'm talking about. There's really no one you'd rather not have on top of you, just wailing punches on you, than Volk. But that fight was in Volk's hood, and now we're in Islam's backyard, and I do think that's significant. And of course, we have Volk coming off of 10 days of training, if that. Volk has said that he really was not expecting this. Is that him holding his cards close to his chest and maybe he did have some indication of this a little bit earlier? Or perhaps he just was training more than he's letting on regardless? I think we'll probably never know. But I think there's some credence to him saying he's going to come into this fight fresher than usual because he's not going to have a grueling camp where he's getting kind of dinged up and little injuries here and there. So these are the questions we need to be asking ourselves. The winner of this fight, I think, solidifies pound for pound number 1. Islam. And honestly, I think this is for GOAT status for Alexander Volkanovski. People are talking about Volk has less to lose than Islam, and I don't know if that's necessarily true. Islam, this is really bad if Islam loses his title, especially because then it is the guy, in the weight class below. But I think Volk's fighting for GOAT status right now, and this is not me being a prisoner of the moment. But, I mean, look at his resume. It's absolutely ridiculous. Islam, I think, is a more impressive double champ win than John Jones' win over Cyril Gane. That fight was just so wonky. Volk GOAT if he wins this one. Seriously, I think he's had more success in sort of the modern era of MMA as well, which factors into that GOAT ranking for me as well. So Volk definitely has a lot on the line, and he's not going to leave anything out there. Volk said that he's going to finish Islam. I think he's going to come out a lot more aggressive in this one, possibly because he's had less of a camp than Islam. So we're going to see a more aggressive Volk, and I ultimately think he finds the finish here. I think Islam is incredible. He's a much better striker than everyone gave him credit for, and then Volk's a lot better grappler than everyone gave him credit for. But Islam I don't really think he's got that power with his hands that Volk does, and certainly not like the technique and just striking prowess. Volk uses feints so well, and I'm kind of fawning over him right here, but I really am. I'm kind of manifesting a Volk win by finish here. I think he gets it done. He's going to come out more aggressive. He's going to take chances, and he knows that he can hurt Islam. He did it the first time around, and I think he can do it again here, but this time leave himself enough time to ultimately find the finish. So that's going to be the pick. That was a long breakdown, guys, but I had an absolute blast going through and looking through all these fights. I'm expecting fireworks the whole way through, beginning of the card to the end. Should be a lot of fun. Hope you all enjoyed that. Timestamps are definitely going to be below. Like, comment, subscribe if you would so please. And I will see you all on the next one. Peace.